times, it happened 3 times, and all 3 times, they did not know why I had this fever delirium. They had different theories, but I decided, well, I'm a good problem solver. I'm going to see what I can find out. And I also prayed about it, and I was led to Asian medicine, and it totally transformed my health problems. And so I was thankful and decided to teach. And so I taught my first classes around 1970, and then much later I started a practice.
And where were you trained? How did you learn how to do acupuncture and use herbs?
I, back then, of course, acupuncture wasn't licensed, but I had Japanese teachers. Dr. Muramoto, who wrote a book called Healing Ourselves, was one of my most influential Japanese teachers. So I started with Japanese, and then the first books that were available from French, and the French were in Vietnam, in Indonesia. So it was Chinese medicine through several cultures, and that was interesting, trying to translate that. And my latest is that I am studying with a French woman, Dr. Dr.
Roche.
And I'll be spending 4 days with her in the Bay Area this weekend. And she reads and writes and translates Chinese. And I've written several peer-reviewed journal articles, and I use her as a reference.
And how is it that you studied in China for a month? What was that like?
Well, I was teaching. I had the East-West Health Center at the time, and I was teaching what I called the millennial class, and it was the largest class in Asian medicine that I had taught, primarily massage and acupressure. And I read in a journal that there was going to be the largest demonstration of Asian artifacts at the Asian Art Museum, which at that time was in the Golden Gate Park, I believe. And and when I went there, at the very entrance, which was the oldest artifact, there was a jar, and it fascinated me. And when I'm fascinated by something, I have to research it. And basically, I wrote an article that said that on the jar, it indicated that the 5,000-year-old culture was basically, they were midwives who were also using Asian medicine. And on the jar there was a woman who was sitting cross-legged and had meridians and acupoints on her body, as well as yin-yang, the 3 levels, the 4 directions and the 4 seasons and the 5 elements. And I submitted it to Xenoplatonic Papers, which is the premier paper for cross-cultural information.
And how old was that jar?
5,000 years old.
Wow. So do you think that acupuncture, or how long has it been around? I mean, 6,000 years? What do we think?
I believe they knew about the points and meridians, but I don't think they did acupuncture then. I think they did acupressure and possibly moxibustion. I think those are older. Acupuncture was only once they learned to metal technology and were able to make pretty close to stainless steel needles.
Wow. For people who don't know, what's moxibustion?
Moxibustion is heating a point. So basically what the Chinese discovered is, first of all, the inside of the body, the organs, kidney, heart, liver, etc., reflect to the outside of the body. And when there are tender spots and you see a pattern, you can tell what's going on inside the body. So I basically, that's what I wrote in this article, and actually they were midwives, and I actually worked with midwives and helped deliver babies for a while using acupressure to relieve pain instead of drugs. And it's real obvious when you're working with midwives, they really know the body. And so they discovered these points that reflected what was going inside, and how to stop menstrual cramps, and how to ease labor, and things like that.
What's interesting to me that is President Xi, as part of his nationalist push in China, is calling for traditional Chinese culture, including traditional Chinese medicine. So there must be kind of a resurgence. Have you seen that in literature, that there's more research and interest in traditional medicine?
Yes, definitely.
He's
I mean,
doing
basically,
some
Mao Zedong was a communist, so he was scientific, and he said alternative medicine is illegal. After, or near the end of his death, or shortly after that, they decided to, because everybody's doing it anyways, they decided to legalize acupuncture and herbs.
They did the Barefoot Doctors, where
And the Barefoot Doctor's Manual, yes.
So was that based on Western medicine, the Barefoot Doctors?
It was a combination
like first
of both.
aid. Oh.
Basically, they required Western doctors to study acupuncture and acupuncturists to study Western medicine.
That was after Mao's death.
Yes, I believe so. And the fact is that Western and then Mao Zedong kicked out the Russians. He disagreed with their worldview. He believed more in Confucianism, and I would say the Communist Party today is more Confucian which is more about
I think of it as valuing tradition and elders and learning and hierarchical
learning. But there's a similarity between a quote in the Gospel of Matthew where they say, treat your neighbor as yourself, and that's Confucianism. So that is stable. So anyways, the Western doctors learned acupuncture, but they didn't practice it. Well, the Asian people who studied acupuncture really absorbed Western medicine and brought it up to date, brought up acupuncture up to date. And they really took advantage of all this Western knowledge of our bodies, our systems, our cells, and things like that.
Before we leave your kind of record of accomplishments, you have a book about pain management. What's the title of that book?
That book is Pain's Healing Secret. And I've been told by people who have studied with other acupressure teachers and read other acupuncture books that after reading my book, they really understood it, because I use a lot of analogies, and I use Western language to explain Chinese language. If you just use Chinese words, even like the word qi, it can be confusing. In the West, and even Western acupuncturists often think of qi as a substance, it's qi in blood. So blood is a substance, and they think of qi as a substance. But the Asians don't think of it as a substance. They think of it as a function of how the body works. And you can visibly see how it works.
Okay, interesting. Let's introduce our next panelist, Julia Ferre. You're studying to be a marriage and family therapist, and you're a hypnotherapist. Tell us about how you got involved in that kind of work.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show, Dr. Gayle. My interest in hypnotherapy spans back many years. I've been practicing as a hypnotherapist since 2010, but my life's work has been involved in health and wellness. Back in the 80s, I changed my diet to macrobiotics, and the change in diet to stop fast food and sugar and meat, really improve my health, and my outlook, emotions were clear, and my thinking was clear. And based on that, over time I evolved to become more interested in the spiritual connection with intuition, wisdom, traditional practices. So I was interested in past life regression, and that's how I was brought into hypnotherapy. I had a past life regression with somebody, and I was so inspired by the information I learned for myself that I decided to gain some training to become a hypnotherapist. And what I found was that people coming into hypnotherapy, more people were interested in present life situation than past life information.
They want to quit smoking.
They want to quit smoking, or they have a trauma or a phobia, perhaps. And over time, I found out that in addition to that, there's more people that want talk therapy than even hypnotherapy. So my career is now expanding to get some training to become a licensed marriage family therapist. I went to school down in San Francisco, to hypnotherapy school. Hypnosis is not a licensed art here in the state of California. You can get a credential for it. And so it's self-regulated is what it's called. Or many people who get hypnotherapy training are already doctors or therapists, for instance. So the school that I went to was mostly therapists coming to go to school to get training to be hypnotherapists. I'm just going around it the other way. But I'm excited about bringing those two practices together to be able to provide talk therapy for people that may want it, with the specialty in hypnotherapy. I think it'll be strong.
When I was familiar with the Chico State master's program to be a therapist, the emphasis was on Kharkov, active listening, sounds like you're feeling, da-da-da. Is that still kind of the focus, or what would you say is their approach? What do they emphasize for you as a therapist?
You know, there's a very good foundation in how to be an effective therapist, both for individuals or for couples or for families. So there's a lot of different foundational skills that we're learning, the skills to be an effective, how to listen well to people and ask good questions. But there's the training too, so we'll be able to diagnose mental illnesses. And since it's a general approach, it isn't specific for any one modality, but there is the emphasis on family systems and to be able to work with couples, which is a different type of interaction than just one-on-one. You know, for me to blend the hypnosis within this practice, generally I've been doing hypnosis one-on-one with people. I have done some couples for hypnobirthing, which is using hypnosis to help couples who are getting ready to prepare for childbirth. And that's been very rewarding. So the applications are, there's a tremendous potential for how to help people.
Do you mind sharing your past life memory that got you started in all this? Where were you?
I went all the way back to Atlantis. Yeah, so it was, whether or not it can be proven is beside the point. You know, the memory that I got was how I was killed in that lifetime because I had spoken out against the authorities. And it's very interesting to me that in this lifetime I'm learning how to regain my voice and be clear about what I'm wanting to do. So when I went to school for hypnotherapy, they talked about that aspect of past life regression, how there's a lot of people in our world who believe in past life regression, and whether or not we can prove it happened is maybe not as important as understanding the significance of those memories and how people derive meaning from that. Similar to dream work, we have ideas come up out of our deep mind that provide answers for us or insights into our character, and we can use that information for self-growth and to better understand ourselves.
I've been working on a book about visionary scientists, and interviews with them are on my YouTube channel, which is just search Gayle Kimball. And one of the people that is very interesting, who's now dead, is Ian Stevenson, who collected over 2,000 accounts, you've probably heard of this, of children's past life memories. And so children are a good case study because they're not so programmed So they had very specific memories of past lives, and they were able to check on it and go, oh yeah, there was that family who did this for their occupation in this village, some of them in India.
Exactly. It's very fascinating, some of the research that's been done, the anecdotal studies, going back into census records and being able to verify certain information. I haven't had that kind of clientele or been able to research census records, for instance. But I still value the practice, not so much to validate that kind of information, but for the results.
There's so many examples I read of people who have some kind of phobia or trauma, and then they do the past life regression and realize they were drowned, and that's why they're afraid of water, and then it clears it. So who cares if they actually were drowned, if there was something therapeutic that happened in that narrative? It works.
That's right. And who are we to judge? It's that holistic view of helping people in their belief system, their memories, how it connects with their emotions. Hypnosis has a really wonderful capacity to help in that regard. What happens in hypnosis is that a person goes deep within their subconscious mind. They connect with the alpha state. And in the alpha state, the brain has the capacity to have new learning, whether it's connecting with emotions, memories, beliefs, or installing a new habit. And in that process of, in the deep alpha state, a person also, there's a healing aspect that goes on because the mind has a chance to rest. There's less cortisol being produced, for instance, while you're in the alpha state. And the brain can rejuvenate and regenerate. So the hypnosis enables a person to enter the alpha state. There's plenty of other modalities that do that too.
Like meditation.
Yoga nidra, for instance.
What really interests me is if a hypnotherapist says to a person who's hypnotized, I am putting a cigarette on your skin, and they put a pencil, then the body gets a blister.
Wow.
So it's amazing to me. It's another aspect of placebo effect that we know is extremely powerful. So do you have any sense of how hypnosis, does it just because it goes directly to the unconscious that it can affect body processes?
Right. I mean, there have been some brain imagery studies that have been done to show what parts of the brain are activated when the person's in hypnosis, and the parts of the brain that are connected with pain, sensation, and affect, they light up. So there have been a lot of pain studies done with hypnosis, empirical-based pain studies, to show that people do have effect, can reduce their amount of pain. Now, as far as the power of the mind to interpret a pencil to be a cigarette and to actually show burns, that's fascinating, isn't it?
A blister, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. We have a good team here. Everybody could work together really well. Dr. Seema Afsari is an osteopath and practicing in Chico. How did you get involved in doing that kind of work, and why did you decide to do that and not MD or something different?
Thank you, Dr. Gayle. I think the osteopathic medical profession was sort of a calling in the sense of what brought me to medicine in the first place. As we were speaking earlier, my degree at the University of California, Santa Barbara was in religious studies and global peace and security, which most people say, well, how did you end up in medicine? And just by speaking or listening to the other guests tonight, you can see that the progression from one's spiritual sense, mind, body, brain connection, it's kind of translates into personal, communal, global sort of relationships. And so osteopathy in the medical field is, in the continuum of medicine, more holistic. The idea that the body is a unit and that structure and function are integrally related. And that, a somatic dysfunction in the body can be a manifestation of something going on in an entirely different part of the body. And it's on a musculoskeletal level, but even in Dr. Turk's field in acupuncture, and I studied a little bit of that as well, there's a really nice synergistic relationship between osteopathic points in the body and acupuncture points, and so it feels to me that it was maybe derived from some of the same, foundational ideas of health and healing. But I also love that the osteopathic profession empowers the body, the individual's body, into healing. And so it changes this patriarchal view of doctor-patient relationship where I'm going to fix you and I'm going to heal you. It's more like, let me help facilitate your body into healing itself. And now I think more and more people are empowered in trying to take their own health in their own hands. And, I think the days are gone of wanting to necessarily be told exactly what to do and what to take to get there.
Because of the internet, we can look up all kinds of...
Which is great. I don't discourage having interest in learning more. I think it allows for conversation. I think, just like Julia was saying, what's rooted in evidence-based medicine and literature is not always comprehensive in understanding how health works. Many Eastern medical practices, traditions, believe in an entity that Western medicine almost entirely neglects. And this is not just what we call the psyche, the chi, prana, the life force, the vitalities. Patients will say, I just don't feel like myself. And all the labs check out, you're fine. But it's not that. And so I really enjoy that exploration with patients and trying to help, figure out what it is that's, blocking that life force. And that helps to guide our treatment plan. And no amount of medicine would change anything if someone's vitality is not there. So
because they resent their spouse or they hate their job or something that's draining them.
And more and more and more, exactly. There's always something.
When osteopaths manipulate, are they thinking joints? Are they thinking muscle? Are they thinking fascia? What's the principle that you're working with?
Sure. I would say if I had to pick one, it would be fascia, but it's not really that isolated. I mean, fascia is the connective tissue that unifies every point in the body, including surrounding vessels, surrounding nerves, surrounding tissues of all sorts. So I think the fascia is a useful outlet to investigate somatic asymmetry. But it depends. We do work with the nervous system, the visceral system, the lymphatic and circulatory systems as well. I didn't have any specialized training outside of my schooling, but craniosacral therapy is sort of its own, world of getting into the, craniosacral rhythmic impulse, which invites an entirely new dimension into healing. But there is also this energy sort of healing hands dimension. You cannot treat a patient if there's not a sort of an accepting of an invitation to some degree. I had some great professors that sort of taught me that, and I never forgot that. So I think that you're working on a few different dimensions. But I would say for the most part, it is musculoskeletal. It is sort of, what you can feel and what you can touch and how that affects everything. And I think we're in a society where it seems like more is better. And most of the tenets in osteopathy that I've learned is that that's not really the case. Myofascial release is some of the most gentle pressure you can apply that can be profoundly releasing. And so that's a good kind of lesson for all of us sometimes.
And craniosacral is like that too, just tiny little touch.
Tiny, yeah.
I took some courses, I had a hard time being so passive. It's like, I want to do something. No, it's a tiny little touch.
Yes.
So how was your medical training different than an MD's?
Osteopathic training, number of years wise is the same. In our didactic years, we have OMT, osteopathic manipulative therapy, and also principles and practice that we learn, and that is learning the modalities and learning the idea behind it all and the history of osteopathy. And then during our didactic years, we also had hands-on labs. Weekly OMM labs where we, learn different parts of the body the whole time. So I think a large part of it was just another system, anatomy and physiology and OMM, and, it was just another subject. And unfortunately, not everybody shares the desire to practice OMT. You'll probably see a lot of DOs that you wouldn't know they were DOs
Right.
because they either went into specialties. Osteopathy traditionally is a community-based practice. And I went to a family practice program that was an osteopathic program where we had an emphasis on that, and proudly, so I enjoyed that, and that was special, and I think that probably most of my colleagues didn't continue using it. But I think it still laid the foundation for how you approach health and wellness. I mean, literally this week I had 3 patients with chest pain, which, of course, but the emergency room either, calls it anxiety or this and that or whatever, but, oftentimes it's just a rib dysfunction. And so I think the osteopathic training, you always think, like, put your hands on a patient and really feel, and then all of a sudden that's sticking right out. So that's what it is, and so you get all the EKG and you do all this stuff, and it's like, it's just right there. That's all you had to do. So that's kind of gratifying. That just happened today, so I'm happy for that story.
What about the relationship of health insurance, the medical insurance? Because what I hear from every medical professional is the health insurance pressure is to see a patient for 15 minutes, get them out the door. I don't have time to really talk. Nurses say I'm spending all my time charting. I don't have time to really soothe my patients in a hospital. Do you feel that kind of insurance company pressure? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's changed the face of medicine entirely, and it will continue to. I'm drawn to integrative medicine because I feel it's the only real way to approach therapeutic relationships. I do a little medical acupuncture. I've done some herbal training, Ayurvedic training, plant-based medicine training, all of these things, and I really struggle with that. But I also feel a responsibility to accept insurance and work in that model because it's otherwise very exclusive. And so you have to be creative. OMT is paid for by most insurances, acupuncture not so much, and not compared to what I think its value is, at least. And so you have to be a little creative with structuring the schedule in a certain way. It's the end of my morning or the end of my day, so it allows me a little bit more time than the 15 minutes, or sometimes it requires some greater frequency of visits, and it's one of the hardest parts, besides the pharmaceuticals, which I try to avoid in the first place, but really it's time. That's a challenge. Still trying to figure it out. I think the integrative community has tried to become more creative with doing group medical appointments and things of that nature, where you can use insurance, but say you're talking about cortisol and stress response and how that affects inflammation, for example. I had that conversation 10 times a day, so it would be nice if we just had 10 patients in a room and we did it once, and so there's some creative ways that I'm still exploring.
The other thing that really hits me about the medical profession is that their doctor error is the second greatest cause of death in hospitals. That's kind of scary. What do you think is going on? Is it because they have long hours and they're tired, or is it just that's inevitable? There's going to be human error. Do we need to go to robotic, machines that read our radiology?
Sure. There wouldn't be any error there. I would say that my husband's a hospitalist here. In Chico as well, and so he, I hear stories about what's going on there. I think the numbers and the time, I think the lack of resources and support make it really difficult. So physicians are charged with seeing 20-some very acutely ill patients on a regular basis. So perhaps just sheer time, you're trying to, and then there's, hospital administration that's saying get them out, because length of stay and insurance doesn't reimburse if they've been here for longer than 3 days, but also prevent readmission, make sure you got it all so that they don't come back. And so there's a little bit of insurance, a lot of bit of insurance mediated, bureaucracy. And also, I think when there's a lot of measures that also come down from both federal regulations and insurance companies about having to put in these core measures and these measures, and so you spend a lot of your time in front of the computer. That's in the hospital as well, instead of direct patient care. And so I think there's a lot of time that's otherwise allotted to what we might call meaningless, even though it's for meaningful use, meaningless type things that make it difficult. I think there's a little bit more cooperation and collaboration that's happening now, like a checks and balances system to try to reduce iatrogenic causes of illness. But I would say it's probably sourced in the same issues that I face outpatient.
The lack of time.
Lack of time.
Yeah.
And a lot of the kind of jumping through loopholes or jumping through hoops all the time to get the job done when the job is really just to take care of the patient.
The amazing thing is that the U.S. spends more on medical care than other countries, other industrial countries, and has worse outcomes. So I don't know if there's any hope for the Medicare for all idea, but do you think that would solve some of these problems?
I think it's worth a shot. But where is that medical expense coming from? What are the big players involved that are putting the price tags on
The pharmaceuticals.
imaging and medications and all of these things? It's a very challenging system. There's not an easy fix, but I think it makes sense to have everyone have some basic level of support. But even in Chico, we have patients that have California Health and Wellness or some of these healthcare exchange insurances, and the providers don't take those insurances because they don't pay it out enough to accommodate for what it takes to run a practice. And so that's very challenging. It's on a lot of different levels.
Especially when young doctors have huge debts that they have to pay off.
Absolutely.
So you got to make money. You can't be an altruist. Let's do a case study. Let's say that each of you is dealing with a person who's way overweight and wants to lose it, because the 2/3 of Americans are overweight. I was kind of watching people go by at the farmer's market tonight, and I would say 2/3 of the people that I saw were overweight. So, Michael, if someone came to you and said, I weigh 300 pounds and I know this isn't healthy, but I haven't had it, I've dieted and it's no use, I just gained the weight back, how would you approach it with the acupuncture and herbs?
Well, first of all, I ask people, do you really want to lose weight? And if they say, yes, I am sick and tired of being overweight, then I know I have somebody who's determined. And then I say, what are you willing to do? And I'll give them a list of things they could do. But I tell them the most powerful and simplest thing is fasting. And I have developed a system of eating 1 meal a day and 3 herb supplementations a day.
So you take capsules, herbs in capsules?
Capsules anyway, but they are processed, which means they have no calories in them. They're pure nutrients, and they're completely non-toxic. We can give these herbs to children, babies, and perfectly safe. One mother told me that she opened up a fresh bottle of 200 pills. She took her 8, which is the standard dose, and when she came back into the room, her child had eaten the whole bottle. And said, do I have anything to worry about? And I said, well, I don't know anybody who's done it before, but it shouldn't be. And the next day, oh no, he just wasn't very hungry that day. So I love these herbs, and they eat those 3 times a day, along with meditation and affirmations and pressing some points. And then they eat 1 meal in a 1 hour period of time, and 23 hours they're fasting. And so the body cleanses. Studies, and there's the National Institutes of Health just published 50 years of research on fasting, and I recommend anybody who's interested go to the nih.gov and just look for fasting. It's amazing. And And so it's difficult, but if a person's determined, they say, oh, I've never had an easier time fasting, and I am losing weight on a regular basis, and I love it.
I've read that sometimes some bodies think of fasting, oh, I've got to get more weight to store up for these hard times of scarcity. So for some people, fasting can make them gain weight. Is that wrong?
It depends what you eat when you're eating. So sometimes I have thin people, and they want to fast for other reasons. They have heart problems, and when you're not eating, the first thing the body does is it cleanses out toxins, and the second thing it does, based on scientific studies, is that the cells turn the digestive, and I won't go into the names of it, if it is cellular biology is there, but they take the digestive material of the cell, and the DNA says there's no calories in the blood, go and digest damaged tissue. And so literally a fasting body lives off diseased and damaged tissue. Viruses are like candy to a fasting body. They love it. They go around and they're just like scoop it up and digest it and put out the waste products.
What about people who are a little hypoglycemic and kind of need to eat so they don't feel fuzzy-headed or lightheaded?
Well, then I put them on the Chinese herbs that are appropriate for that condition. So everybody gets, there's not one herb thing that I do. You can't just write a book on it and say everybody do this. But the fasting 1 meal a day is easy. You can look that up. Google defines it real easy, 1 in 23. But the herbs, I don't know anybody else who's doing that. And I've asked a lot of herbalists if they know anybody who was using herbs to support fasting. And I have been interviewed by active herb companies. So if somebody wanted to read 2 interviews with me about this, just Active Herb and Michael Turk, and it'll pop up on their screen, and that's what I do.
What about secondary gain? So someone could come to you and say, I weigh 300 pounds, I want to lose weight, but then their unconscious says, no, I need to have this weight because then I won't have to date, or I'll be like the other people in my family, or I need it to protect me because I'm really sensitive, or do you address those kind of unconscious secondary gain issues?
Well, I studied self-hypnosis, and which means you're studying hypnosis also. And so when people come to me, I ask them to write down their 3 most important health goals. Some people, come in and say, oh, I love riding my bike, but I can't anymore because of an injury, or I can't do this because I'm overweight. And so as part of their 3 times a day taking the herbs, they affirm what they want. And with that affirmation, the subconscious mind then starts feeding you what you want. So if you're always thinking negative thoughts and negative ideas and only listen to people who are speaking negative stuff, well, your subconscious mind's going to feed you negative stuff, and you're going to see the world as deep, ugly, and dangerous. But if you only listen to positive people and what they have to say, and you program your mind with positive thoughts, then you're going to see the good in people and the good in the world. Even if other people would say, oh, that's horrible, you're going to say, well, not really, because we can take that challenge and turn it into something good.
Right. That's our most difficult challenges are our best lessons often.
And true for me.
Me too. Julia, if someone comes to you with this 300-pound person and says, I've tried everything, I've tried a million diets, I lose a little and then I gain it right back, what would you do with them?
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? I would approach it from 3 different angles. One is from feelings, one is from thoughts, and one is behavior. When I typically do hypnosis, I talk with people for 20 minutes or so to find out what's going on for them before we then formulate a hypnosis session. And in that discovery, we find out, does a person need work on self-worth, self-esteem, some of the feelings that they have that would cause them to feel bad about their weight, or maybe they had a trauma in their past that they need to work through. That would also be part of their feelings. we can do that kind of work in hypnosis to help address those uncomfortable feelings and come to peace about that. Hypnosis is very good for helping reduce anxiety about trauma, increasing confidence, self-worth, self-esteem, those kinds of things. Another aspect is thinking. People can have faulty thinking about their habits. For instance, many people have an all or nothing type of thinking that, they start a diet, they start to reduce, lose weight, and then they have a party that they go to and they overeat and they think, I've just blown it, and they just give everything up. And to address some of their faulty thinking, and that they can temper that so that it doesn't have to sabotage them. Those are really good things that we can also work on in hypnosis. And then behavior itself, just the actual things that they're doing, the habits of eating, the habits of food selection, or how to navigate different situations where they may find they're in a situation where it's hard to control their impulses. Those are behaviors, and we can work on those kinds of things too. But it's nice to clarify with a person what's their issue is, because not everybody has every single issue, of course. In my experience, most people come in and wanting to lose weight, working on self-esteem and self-worth is crucial, and that's often where we begin to help people feel confident that they can lose weight and be successful in that.
The kind of old-fashioned way of inducting someone in hypnosis is you look at a pendulum, you're getting sleepier and sleepier. What do you do to get someone into a hypnotic state? What technique do you use?
Well, there are techniques like that, which some people respond really well to that. The relationship that a person has with a hypnotherapist is important. People need to feel safe and comfortable that this will be an effective procedure for them, and that they'll get some benefit from that. So gaining trust with a person is really the first step, building that relationship with a person. The techniques are, I do talk to people, talk them through a guided relaxation, physical, progressive relaxation of the muscles. Everybody likes that. Everybody's is tired. They need some stress relief, and we almost always begin with that, just to help introduce them to the concept of hypnosis and to see how they respond.
And then what kind of suggestions do you make? I mean, usually the kind of movie thing is you're going deeper and deeper, 6, deeper, 5, deeper. Do you do that kind of counting and suggestions?
I have, yeah. Not everybody responds to that. A lot of people do. The movies portray hypnosis in a certain way, and that's kind of a limiting thing. There's other ways to help people relax, which are very, very gentle, kind. Metaphors can be useful. Scripts can be useful. Helping people relax different muscles can be useful. Yeah, a lot of different techniques.
A lot of people who are doing peer kind of counseling work use the energy psychologies like emotional freedom technique and thought field therapy and all the different letter groups. And it seems to me that that's kind of a form of self-hypnosis. Because you're tapping and talking, and so it keeps the conscious mind busy so you can make suggestions. Do you think that's kind of a fair way of looking at it?
There's so much overlap, and like Michael Turk said too, of how self-hypnosis is that process of getting yourself in that relaxed state and then using positive affirmations to repeat to yourself positive things for confidence, self-esteem, things that you want to achieve. And yeah, there's a lot of overlap between all of these modalities, and they're very good.
Do you ever do that before final exams or a big paper? I can do this easily. I'm relaxed and confident.
Yeah, I do.
Good. So that's why you're breezing through grad school. Ask Dr. Gayle is made possible by the generous contributions of KZFR supporters and by Baird Roofing Company. For a hole in your roof, I hope you don't have one, or a whole new roof, Baird Roofing Company has been serving Butte County for more than 30 years. Whether it's re-roofing an existing structure or a first-time roof for a new construction, Baird Roofing has got you covered. Ha ha ha. More information at bairdroofing.com by calling 342-1631 or stopping in at 11025 The Midway. Ask Dr. Gayle is made possible by Feather River Recreation and Park District in Oroville, enriching lives through parks and recreation opportunities for all ages. The district offers preschool, martial arts, dance, senior fitness classes, public swimming pools, and much more. Upcoming summer programs include swim lessons, adult softball leagues, gymnastics and cheerleading camps, and a 9-week kids summer camp from May through August. Also, the district is hiring. For a complete list of job opportunities and more information, visit frrpd.com or call 533-2011. So Dr. Gayle is on the second Thursday of every month. I videotape the show so you can see it forever on my YouTube channel. You just go to Gayle Kimball and you'll find it. And you also might want to check out the Visionary Scientists, whose interviews are on the YouTube channel. And those people like to talk, so they're an hour and a half or 2 hours each. I did one with a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and I'm trying to get him to let me make the interview public, because he's really a character. He's in Britain. So the next month's panel is addresses what a progressive city can do. So we'll have 3 city council members and some community activists. And in July, Sandra's going to do a show on working with handicapped people while I'm taking my little friend to Maui. And I wanted to also mention that the show 2 months ago was about Native American issues, and we mentioned that Allie Metters Knight was making a mural on 2nd Street, and I wanted people to know that it's been defaced. And I don't think of Chico's being a white nationalist hotbed, but apparently there are white nationalists here who defaced her mural. So I wanted people to know we have to watch out for that kind of hatred. Sorry, Allie. So tell us, you have this overweight patient. What do you do with her or him?
This is a common presentation in my practice in primary care. I think from primary care medical standpoint, digging into the root cause of why is a little bit broad. First, you want to figure out, is this being driven by hormonal issues? We always want to blame the thyroid. Is it the thyroid? Is it cortisol mediated because of sleep disturbances due to sleep apnea? Is it dysbiosis of the gut that's preventing proper digestion and assimilation of nutrients that run cellular metabolic processes that allow us to, have whole body metabolism? Is it rooted in trauma? And what are people eating, and when are they eating, and how much are they eating it? Some of the Eastern traditions like Ayurveda believe our largest meal should be in the middle of the day because our digestive fire, Agni, is at its peak, and then a very light dinner. So, are we snacking? All of these things. Kind of the history is really important. Getting the laboratory work done and getting a good idea of diet, which is a feat in and of itself. Really, really digging. But then it's a multifaceted approach. I have a lot of patients who come with ideas about different diets, like, what do you think about the ketogenic diet? What do you think about the paleo diet? And I, much like religion, say that, I think that there's many paths, but there's a few tenets that we can all kind of agree upon, which is the wholer the food, the better. Michael Pollan's, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I kind of go by that tenet, but intermittent fasting is probably, or fasting itself is probably the only diet across the board that I ever officially recommend. Because we're finding that there's a lot of genetic markers that can potentially play a role in how people process macronutrients like fat and carbohydrates. So a whole food plant-based diet versus a ketogenic diet can treat 2 different people very differently. So that's long-winded idea to how the presentation is, but how I approach it is to rule out some of those obvious dysfunctions, and then really get into lifestyle, stress management, and quality of diet, and also help remind people, just like Julia said, that there's a lot of on the wagon, off the wagon, and I try to talk about the dynamic process of health, about not thinking of our decisions every day as, success or defeat, but just this dynamic process of moving towards a goal. I try to be realistic too. I see a lot of college-age students, a lot of 30 and 40-year-olds. We live in a vibrant town where we eat, drink, and be merry, and you have to be realistic. Telling people you can't have this and you can't do that, and no more of this, say goodbye to your Sierra Nevada burger. That's something that people have a really strong emotional connection to. Food is culture, food is community. We are literally what we eat. So it's very comprehensive, and it's something I talk about every day. I guess it's more rare that I, in isolation, talk about weight, because it ends up opening up the door to another
diabetes
channel.
and heart, yeah.
Right, and so, and what I've learned, much like cigarette smoking, you can't, use fear tactics to say, like, well, if you don't lose weight, you're gonna be in the ER. That doesn't work. I think most people that are overweight that have a laundry list of medical problems know that. So it's digging and getting into the root of it, and when needed, using a variety of resources to try to combat some of those challenges. And a lot of it is inflammation. One of the newer interests of mine is in the field of functional medicine, which is really just getting into the root cause of things. We know that inflammation, this new hot topic, is driving a lot of different things. So, personal anecdotal example, I have atopic dermatitis, and so when I was investigating, trying to find triggers, I found that one of my favorite food groups, legumes, I'm allergic to. And so when I removed those from my diet, I was inserting all sorts of things because I wasn't sure what else to eat, because I was just used to beans and legumes. Weight fell off despite some of my diet not being that great, because it was actually inflammatory for me. And so, there's...
Could you define that for us, of inflammation? What really is that?
Yeah, inflammation. So inflammation is a cellular-mediated response of overactivation of the immune system most often against the self if it's autoimmune. It is a cellular process where macrophages and other components of the immune system, white blood cells, basically create these oxidative stress reactions at a molecular cellular level that then have long-term consequences. And inflammation, depending on your genetics and who you are and what you do, can manifest in different ways. So my inflammation would lead to ATP or cardiovascular disease because of my family history, and someone else it's PCOS, and someone else it's a mental health issue. So it's sort of this underlying disruptive process of the immune system, essentially.
And it seems to be the basis for a lot of major health issues, the cardiovascular, cancer.
Very much.
Yeah.
And we're finding, now the microbiome, the gut, is finally a focus, a very large focus, and what is a major driver of inflammation. Whether or not we have good and bad bacteria, were you a child that had frequent ear infections, frequent throat infections, had antibiotics your whole life, and then were fed convenience foods for most of your childhood life, and then now all of a sudden, there's inflammation. Stress is a huge driver of inflammation. It's neurologically modulated, and that is amazing. It's difficult for people to see the direct relationship of stress to inflammation. I feel like I spend a lot of time trying to convince patients, like, I promise there's a very strong correlation. It's easy to say that the cake causes this, but stress causes this too, in equal parts. And that's been I think that's a fundamental truth that I was really never taught in all of my medical school training, even with this holistic DO background. this was integrative medicine that brought me to this, and now we see it.
Where do you look to for inspiration? I'm thinking of Dr. Andrew Weil's integrative medicine program at University of
Yes.
Arizona.
Yes.
Harvard is doing kind of integrative medicine. Where are the kind of leading edge integrative medicine research centers?
Sure. I sort of am a little bit self-taught in that regard because I thought about doing the Weil program, which is quite cost prohibitive. A lot of integrative training is. I decided to sort of piecemeal my learning, and with medical acupuncture, Ayurveda. Medical acupuncture was through Helms Medical Institute, based out of Berkeley. Ayurvedic training is Maharishi Ayurveda Institute. Foundations of Herbal Medicine by Tiriona Lodog, who actually now runs that fellowship program through the Academy of Integrative and Holistic Medicine. Madison, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin in Madison is a really great hub for, I get a lot of patient handouts there for, reflux and hypothyroid.
They're also doing the research on meditators and how they change their...
MRI, yeah, good stuff. Neuroplasticity, yeah, it's beautiful stuff. So that's where I get a lot of my information. The Institute of Functional Medicine is, I just kind of have done all of this training since I got out of residency and came to Chico. So sort of a hodgepodge of a lot of different resources. And I decided to do that instead of the traditional fellowship program because it was a little bit more versatile and allowed me to do it on my own. I have 2 young kids and, my own practice. So it's been, an up and down journey in terms of how much I can commit to it.
Did you have your children after med school?
Yes, one was in my last year of residency and one was, he's 18 months now, so.
How did you do that? Because I think of residency as you don't sleep very much, and you don't sleep very
Yes.
much with a baby. So
That's true. It's different. 3rd year of family medicine residency is probably a little bit more merciful than the rest of my training. By then you sort of have you're mostly outpatient, and you're working with physicians and providers that sort of understand. And it was tough. It was very tough because my husband's also in medicine, so we were kind of on the same path there. But we had support with his family, and a little bit. She came from Wisconsin to Michigan, where we were, and stayed with us for a few months and helped
good.
with childcare. But it was very challenging.
yes.
I'm sure everyone has their challenging childcare balancing profession stories.
I remember when I was teaching after my son was born, a student would ask a question, and there'd be like this lag because my brain was so tired it would
Yes.
to take a minute. Oh yeah, okay, I can answer that question.
Absolutely.
So you've been listening to KZFR, and now it's time for peanut butter and jelly time with Sandra. And just want listeners to know that there's free energy balancing every Wednesday through Shalom at 1010 Mangrove. We have Reiki, and we have Joe Ray, and we have chakra balancing. So every Wednesday, drop in 5 to 7. And I do my mind power workshop, so there's all kinds of resources in Chico. And there's a new health wellness center that's opening up in Paradise at Mariana Love's painting studio. And their opening is going to be May